Next effect is the kill effect, which if set to 0, it simply kills the trigger output, so there is no trigger coming out with the node, or you can change the length of the trigger, and it's a way to shorten the trigger earlier than the next step happens. And so you can really set any length of trigger, and we are going to see that in action. So let's play the pattern as it is. These are just, if you remember from earlier in the video, automatic gate off and on every time there is a new node. I didn't set any custom gate, okay? So I just put a few nodes and they are playing. Well, there is some glide here, it doesn't matter. What's happening here is that this automatic gate on and off is coming out of the trigger output. This trigger output is going to the gate input on the 2HP ADSR, and that ADSR with 0 release is opening and closing the VCA. So because this node is sustained all the way up until before the next node, the VCA is open for each of these nodes, okay? Now, let's add the kill switch. Kill effect, no, the kill switch. Now, with 0, 0, 0, it's killing the trigger output for that step, which means on that step, the ADSR is not receiving a gate, so it's not opening the VCA. This is why we sort of muted this node. But we will see a different use of the kill 0 in a second. Now let's start to increase the length of this kill. So we start and extend the trigger. You just hear tuck. And it goes longer and longer. Until it's fully open. So it plays until the next note, because this step now is fully open. Let's leave this here or whatever, it doesn't matter. Let's kill this one. So now the trigger output is stopped for this. If I was to increase the release on the ADSR on the first node, you see, start hearing this? So what happens is that the ADSR from this step is keeping the VCA open. With the release, it's open up until this node also plays. Now, because this node has a kill 0, the trigger is not coming out for this node, but the actual CV is going out. It's a way to change the pitch of your voice without triggering a brand new gate. So we are not sending a new ADSR envelope to the VCA for this node. We're just using the end of the release of the previous node to get this pitch change without triggering a brand new ADSR envelope. If I increase the release, so you hear the pitch change, but without a new trigger for this node. And if I was to reduce the release on the ADSR that we trigger here, eventually this node will be muted. And now you don't hear it anymore. Okay. Extremely handy, especially for the fact that you can have very fine control on the length of the trigger or gate. Gate in this case, the longer you make it, the more it's like a gate of any specific node on any specific step. So you can really shorten or lengthen each node, but just as much as you want. The next and last effect available is the breakpoint. Now, we've already used the breakpoint a few times in this and the previous video. Remember, patterns can be up to 64 steps, but you can add a breakpoint anywhere. Like in this case, I have it on step 16, and I made a 16 steps pattern. This is also a 16 steps pattern because I have a breakpoint here. And this is also a 16 steps pattern because I have a breakpoint here. But of course, you could put the breakpoint anywhere. Out of those 64 steps, you can have a 3 steps pattern, 4 steps pattern. It's just wherever you place the breakpoint, you can reduce the number of steps in that pattern. Now let's, for example, put a breakpoint on step 9. No, not a pitch one, but a breakpoint. It gets to step 9 and goes back to 0. Okay, now let's get rid of this. This simple sequence, I'm using a rhythmic pattern, some kick-hats, a snare, with some probability for some of the steps, just to add some variety, and I have some groove settings, but we are going to talk about the groove settings next. And then these other 2 patterns on the same track, which is a Pico VCO. I have just a few notes, 16 steps, and another pattern here with a few more notes, some modulation, and 16 steps instead of 64 steps. Now, there is more you can do. Let's go into this pattern. There is more you can do with the breakpoint. Step length, the number of steps in a pattern, is just the first of the break parameters. You can use this to decide how many times a pattern repeats before it moves to the next pattern. So right now, it plays once and it goes to the next one. This plays once and it goes to the next one. But let's say we set the parameter here to 003. It means the pattern will play once and then repeat 3 times. So the pattern, this pattern in this case, will play 4 times before moving to the next one. So let's check it out. So it plays this and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it goes to the next one. As simple as that. And you can set any bigger numbers of repeats, it's up to you. There is one more thing we can do with this break effect, and that is decide where to jump to a specific step in the pattern. And you do that by going into the 10 something value. So let's put this to 00. Let's stop it and okay. Now I telling him to jump to step 00. So when you have a break 1 and then the next 2 digits, 1 means jump. Now it's jumping to step 00, which means it's playing the 16 steps and back to step 00, which is just the same as setting a breakpoint, really. I can change now. So I'm going to change this, for example, to, well, let's say step 08. So 1 for the jump, and then I go to 8. You see? Of course, what's happening, because this is a jump, this pattern is never ending. It's stuck into its own loop. It never reaches the end of the pattern because, we're telling it to jump back and then it goes here and then it jumps back. And I don't know, we can change this jump to, for example, step 0D. Zero E. course, you can set this jump anywhere, so you could have hit to play, I don't know, the first. Let's set it to play the first 8 steps and then maybe go to step 4. Maybe even do that here. So we could, for example, start this and this. So we played the first, restarted, played the first few steps, and then it goes back to number 4. The last parameter to the right after all the effects is the groove column. This changes the amount of sub-steps per pattern step. 6, you see this is all 6, 6, 6, 6 and so on. 6 is the normal number of sub-steps per each step. And it's also the preset, so if you don't change it, everything gets clocked, synced, more mechanically, sounds a little bit more like a robot playing, but everything is perfect sync. And the 6 sub-steps per step, that is equal to the resolution of 24 ppqn. But you can change these to fewer or more sub-steps per steps. So you can start creating some sort of shuffle groove by having one step with fewer sub-steps and maybe compensate the next one with more sub-steps. So let's have an example. Let's start the sequence. Very simple sequence, so we can focus on the sub-steps, right? So let's keep things simple. This is just a bass line, and it's the peak of VCO, and this is a very robotic, mechanical percussive pattern. Let's go into this pattern. You can see all the sub-steps are set to 6, and I just have a kick, a snare, a kick, a snare, a kick, and a hi-hat. And remember, these are dual sample playback tracks, so in the same pattern, on the second sample playback track, I just have this mechanical closed hats playing. There is some difference in volume, but it's just the same hat with different volume alternating each step. I'm going to change the sub-steps for these hats. So I'm going to, I don't know, let's do reduce, or let's increase 1 and reduce 1. So this 6, I'm going to change it to 7, and this I'm going to change it to 5. Because I've increased 1 by 1 and decreased the next one by 1, the overall number of sub-steps for the pattern has not actually changed. So the pattern is still just as long as it was before. And I can keep doing that with the other ones. Now let me put it back to 6 and replay it. Okay, you can hear it's very mechanical. Now, let's change it to 7, 5, 7, 5. And let's see how this one sounds now. And what I can do, I can also change these last 2 steps here where I have the kick and the open hi-hat to 7 and 5. You can definitely feel the difference in groove compared to before, where it was all ta 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 ta. Now it's more ta 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 ta. There is more shuffle, more groove. Or you can apply the groove to all or some of the notes of the any track, any modular track. It doesn't have to be just on the drum tracks, right? And of course, it doesn't have to be 7/5. It could be 5/7. It could be any number. It could be, well, of course, now it's gonna sound a little bit weird. 8 and 4. So it's even a more pronounced shuffle. And then a less pronounced. You can even put this back to 6. So, you can do really a lot of variations in a little shuffle groove, changes of timing on individual hits. Of course, if you decrease the substeps a lot or increase the substeps a lot, and not trying to keep the same number of overall substeps in a pattern, you can have this pattern that starts to run away from the other patterns on other tracks, because now the overall substeps, the overall length of this pattern is kind of different. And that, may be the effect you want, if you can control it, or may not want it. So, for example, let's exaggerate, okay? So let's go back and play these two things. And let's really go, have some increase a few number. Oh, it's starting to go straight. Of course, if you are doing that on purpose, you know what you're trying to achieve, so you can time it so that it still sounds interesting within the context of the rhythmic structure of your song. So yeah, we have shuffle groove, and you can change it per step, and you can change it on any of the modular tracks or any of the 4, because these are dual tracks, for sample playback tracks. So that's pretty cool. Now, time to look at the patches. You can have 176 patches, and you can apply any patch per step. What is a patch? A patch is a collection of a lot of settings for all the effects that are available in the sequencer. So I'm talking about CV effects, glide, modulation, trigger, probability on the effects, and so on. So let's start with creating a patch. Well, let's start the sequencer. So we have some sounds to play with, okay? Right, let's go into this pattern. And this is well, there is no patch at the moment. To create a patch, you just press OK. And if you already had some patch created, like now we have a patch 00 created, you can just select it this way. And if we had another patch, then you can just scroll through the available patches to assign them. So let's start from patch 00. We are going to enter the patch by pressing patch. And this is a patch. You see, these are all the effects and related parameters you can edit and set per patch. So as an example, let's say I want to create a patch 00 where there is some glide, and this is the range of parameters. You can, change it, and you can hear it in real time. They are applied. This is live editing. So I'm adding some glide. Now I removed it. Okay, so I'm having patch 00 is going to have some glide, and it's going to have some modulation, which is going to the filter. So let's have some modulation. So it's changing the cutoff frequency on the filter. And I'm going to set a shorter trigger. Oops. No, with some repeats. So set some trigger repeats on this patch, and you could have effects on triggers and modulation of other channels. These are the same effects we've seen before into the effects section of this video, where we went through each individual effect. If you want to know what each individual effect does, check that section of the video. The patch is just a way to apply a lot of different effects all at the same time, per step. let's do this. So back to the pattern, and we applied a patch 00 on the first step. On this step, we want to apply patch 01, which is empty because we did not edit it yet. So let's enter the patch. And the first thing I want to do here, I want to, for example, set the glide to 0. So patch 00 activates the glide, and patch 01 switches it off. But I want something else on patch 01. Let's say I want to make sure that the pitch is back to 40 in case we change it somewhere else. 40 means no pitch change in relation to the actual note values. And I want to set the modulation to 0, so a low modulation. So it changes in this case, the modulation is going to the filter cutoff frequency. And I want to have a trigger probability, so the note may trigger or may not. Put it sort of halfway through. I don't have a table applied, so it's no point in having probability. I can set the automation of the LFO to 0, or to 1. We activate the LFO. And so what I could do maybe for patch 00, I can deactivate the LFO. So what I do, I go to the automation 0 and I set it to 0. So the LFO is stopped with patch 00 by switched on with patch 01. So this is a pretty efficient way, pretty cool way to get a bunch of parameters that you want, that you would want to apply to a step. You can modulate the glide, you can have a CV probability, you can change triggers. For example, let's create another patch where we change the trigger length. So let's create a patch down here. Press OK to create a new patch. 02, it's going to be empty, so let's go into the patch. And what we're going to do is change the trigger length. So we have shorter triggers with 02. Now we're just listening to the voice. That's what it is really. You create a patch, you edit them, you set a bunch of settings, including probabilities, so you may want specific types of probability. So you create a patch, and then instead of having to go into the effects section and set probability for this step, a change of glide for this step, a change of trigger length for this step, if you have certain parameters that work well for the track, you can put them all together in a patch, and then you simply apply that same patch to any of those steps that you want to you want to be affected that way. It's pretty effective, it's pretty powerful, it's pretty cool. Oh, and a couple of more things. Let me start this again. First of all, I noticed that in patch 01, I set the automator 1 on, and I wanted to set it off in patch 00, automator 1, but what I did in patch 00, I set the wrong automator off. I set the wrong automator off. It's not this one. If you don't want a parameter anymore, you simply do shift delete, and this is the one I wanted to set to off. Also, if you're in the pattern and you have a patch that is working and you want to add just some slight modification to that patch, well, of course you need it to be a new patch so you can apply that modification elsewhere, to other steps. You can simply do the same thing as you can do with whole patterns. You highlight the patch you want to change and you just type Shift OK. So OK creates a new patch. Shift OK, it will create a clone. Patch cloned. You can get the one you had here before, you just scroll through and you can apply a clone somewhere else. I don't know, just apply it here. There was patch 03. And if we go into patch 03, it's just the same as patch 01 for now, but then you can change things and do whatever you want to it. So yes, it's very powerful. Alright guys, this is the end of phase 2 of my look at the NerdSeq hybrid tracker sequencer. In the first video, and that is a long video, we covered most of the NerdSeq as an overview, but with a decent amount of detail on most of the features really. And then we focused on the sequencer, on sequencing patterns, sequencing multi-track loops, clips, changing content of those clips live. We even looked at using some CV for the inputs. We looked at the dual sample playback tracks, a lot of stuff really, but it is a long video, but if you look in the description under the video, there is a clickable timed index. So you can watch the video beginning to end, or you can just click on the section you want to see more about. Part 2, I wanted to focus on the pattern and every single feature, parameter, function of the pattern, but I decided to divide part 2 in smaller chunks, because there is quite a lot you can do in the pattern and per step. So I didn't want to have another 2-hour long video. So I think it's fair to say that from video 1 all the way to the end of this video, we did cover a substantial amount of what this very capable sequencer can do over its 10 tracks. But I will follow up with some more videos, maybe covering something in more detail that I didn't fully cover yet. I will definitely try experimenting with the NerdSeq input-output expander, the gamepad to control it, MIDI in, MIDI out, maybe connecting the NerdSeq to other clock receiving devices. Hopefully I might be able to have a look at some of the other expansion modules as they come out, the new features with new firmware. So I will try to keep this channel up to date with the NerdSeq, because it is one of these excellent sequencers, and the NerdSeq is probably the most capable in a way due to the way the tracker sequencer works and the sheer number of features and editable parameters, programmable parameters per step. It's a very capable beast. Probably the most striking feature of it is that once you start using it, it is really fast to use. So it's not complicated. It may be defined as complex just because it can do a lot of stuff, but it allows you to do all of these things very easily. And I'm not exaggerating. It's really easy to operate. It all makes sense. It's very consistent in the way it works. And it is just easy to use. You can see from my videos, you can do a lot of things and you can do them really fast. I mean, that's how easy it is to use. And yes, let me know in the comments if you are enjoying these videos, if you're finding them useful, if there's something specific you would like me to cover more in the follow-up videos. And I would appreciate it if you could help me spreading the voice, share these videos on forums, on your Facebook page, click on like, maybe share them on Twitter, Instagram. And until next time, have fun and keep Euroracking.